Okay, so there are three kinds of GIT reflexes. Reflexes that are integrated entirely within the enteric nervous system. So they don't involve the spinal cord or the brainstem, and they're integrated entirely within the enteric nervous system. And these include reflexes that are concerned with controlling secretions, peristalsis, mixing, and reflexes that have local inhibitory effects. Okay, and the next kind is reflexes from the gut to the prevertebral ganglia and then back to the gut. So these reflexes are used to transmit signals over long distances to other parts of the GIT. For example, so within this category, there are three types of reflexes: the gastrocolic reflex, the enterogastric reflex, and the third kind is the colonnoilial reflex. So as you can tell by their names, the gastrocolic means that signals from the stomach will cause the emptying of the colon. And in the enterogastric reflex, signals from the small intestine and the large intestine will inhibit stomach motility and secretion. And the third kind is the colonnoilial, which means signals from the colon will inhibit the emptying of the ileal contents into the colon. The third kind of reflex is reflexes from the gut to the spinal cord or brainstem and then back to the gut. Within this category, there are two types of reflexes. Reflexes which arise from the stomach and the duodenum, and they go to the spinal cord and brainstem, and from the brainstem, they come back to the stomach and duodenum through the vagus nerve. The second kind is pain reflexes, which arise from the gut, and these pain reflexes cause general inhibition of the entire gut. And third kind is the defecation reflex, which begins from the colon, the rectum. The defecation reflex is spinal cord reflex, so the integrative center is the spinal cord. So from the colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, these signals will go to the spinal cord and then come back to these same areas to cause the emptying of the colon and rectum. Alright, so there are two kinds of functional movements in the GIT, and these two kinds of movements are going to occur in all parts, beginning from the stomach and then the small intestine, large intestine. So basically there are two kinds of movements: propulsive movements and mixing movements. The propulsive movements are also called peristalsis, and these movements cause food to move forward along the GI tract. The second kind of movements are the mixing movements, which keep the intestinal contents mixed at all times. Okay, so first of all, we have the propulsive movements, also called peristalsis. Peristalsis is an intrinsic property of many syncytial smooth muscle tubes, and so if you stimulate any point within the gut wall, any point in the gut wall, a contractile ring appears at that point within the circular smooth muscle, and then this ring spreads along the gut tube in the forwards direction. And peristalsis occurs in bile ducts, ureters, the ducts of other glands. So mostly the stimulus for peristalsis is distension, but other types of stimuli can also initiate peristalsis, like chemical or physical irritation, as well as parasympathetic signals. For peristalsis to occur, we need a functioning myenteric plexus. So if there's some kind of damage to the myenteric plexus, or if the myenteric plexus is blocked by drugs like atropine, which is an anticholinergic drug, peristalsis will be blocked. So although we said that peristalsis occurs in the forwards direction, from the stimulated point, peristalsis can actually occur in both directions, in the forwards direction as well as in the backwards direction. But the peristaltic wave usually dies out in the direction towards the mouth. And because of this, we say that the myenteric plexus is polarized in the anal direction. Okay, so let's revise this process again. Okay, so a certain part of the esophagus is stimulated by distension, and then a contractile ring appears in the circular smooth muscle. At the stimulated point, the circular muscle is contracted and the longitudinal muscle is relaxed, while in the area in front of it, the circular muscle is relaxed while the longitudinal muscle is contracted. So you have to remember this. Okay, so when a segment of the GIT is stimulated, in that part, a contractile ring appears in the circular smooth muscle, and that part is basically constricted. Basically, the region behind the bolus is constricted, while in front of the stimulated point, which means towards the direction of the anus, the gut wall relaxes many centimeters downstream, and we call this part receptive relaxation. This allows the food to be propelled more easily towards the anus than towards the mouth. So we can call this either the myenteric reflex or the peristaltic reflex, because for this reflex to happen, we need a functioning myenteric plexus. So now let's talk about the law of the gut. This peristaltic reflex, along with the anal direction of movement of the peristalsis, is known as the law of the gut. So here's another diagram showing peristalsis. So this was the stimulated point, and over here it's labeled the propulsive segment. So in this region, the circular muscle is contracted and the longitudinal muscle is relaxed. And in this part, which is the receiving segment, this part, as you can see, this part appears to be relaxed. So in this part, the circular muscle is relaxed while the longitudinal muscle is contracted. Alright, so the thing about mixing movements is that these mixing movements are different in different parts of the gut. They're different in the stomach, and small intestine, and the large intestine. So over here I have a diagram of the mixing movements in the small intestine. In some areas, it's the actual peristaltic contractions that are causing the mixing. So you might be wondering, how can peristalsis cause mixing when peristalsis is actually pushing the contents forwards? Because if you want mixing to occur, you need some back and forth movement, right? So how does peristalsis cause mixing? Well, in some areas, for example, if this part at the very end has a sphincter, all right, and then a peristaltic wave is coming, but this sphincter is contracted, it's closed, right? So the contents in the gut won't be propelled forwards. Instead, they will be forced backwards, and because of this back and forth movement, there would be mixing. I hope you get this concept. Another example of a mixing movement is mixing movements caused by local intermittent. Another example of mixing movements is mixing movements which are caused by local intermittent contractions, which occur every few centimeters in the gut wall. So this is what you can see in this diagram. There are local constrictive contractions that appear at certain intervals. And these contractions usually last for 5 to 30 seconds, and then new constrictions occur at the new points. And because of these intermittent contractions, eventually the intestinal contents are chopped or mixed, and you get the point.